Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Kuma International Architecture Month. We are talking about architecture and resilience this month, and we are about to have our fourth lecture in the second week of the program. So last Tuesday, we talked to Anna Kukic about resilience in memory, and this week we're continuing on the same topic with Sabina Tanović. The week before that, we were actually talking about architecture, building resilience through destruction with Armina Pilav and Paul Laws. So next week, we will have Azra Akshamia and Amra Haji Muhammedovic with us to talk about resilience as culture, and then we will finish off the month with division and resilience with Igor Kovac and Nasiha Pozdir. So we're actually looking forward to the remaining of the program. And today with us, we have Sabina Tanović. We're very happy to have her with us. We also wanted to thank everyone present here in watching us live on Facebook and also being with us on Zoom. So thank you so much for taking the time and being with us here today. I just want to say a few words about Sabina. So Sabina was actually with us last year as well. And we are so happy to have her back. She's been such a great speaker. We look forward to working on hopefully many other things with Sabina. Sabina also contributed to our publication called Unfolding Sarajevo from last year, same theme as last year. And so she also has her own publication, which we will talk about a little bit later on in the program, perhaps after her lecture. So about Sabina, Sabina actually graduated from the architectural faculty in Sarajevo, she got her undergraduate degree there. And following that, she finished her master's and PhD at the Technical University of Delft, where she's actually also teaching right now. And her research and work deals with construction of contemporary memorials. And so that's also kind of the theme of her book as well, which we will talk about perhaps later on in the program. Sabina is also the winner of a local competition for the memorial, the Tunnel Memorial, which Anna Kukic mentioned last time on Tuesday. Anna talked about her master thesis, which dealt with the same topic. And so it will be interesting to see Sabina's point of view on this, since she did win the design competition for it. So without further ado, Sabina, the floor is yours, and we welcome you and we'll really look forward to your lecture.
Thank you, Leila. I hope I'm unmuted. I am. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Leila and Claudia, for giving me space to speak. It is a little bit freaky because it feels like I'm talking with myself, which is not weird. I do that actually often, but still, hello, somebody's sending us something in chat. Later I was thinking, if you have questions, please, I know that this can be a bit confronting, send them in chat or maybe even private chat, and then I will try to answer them. So not to take too much time, I will share my screen immediately. Let me see the big screen. Okay. So I hope you see my screen. There's also...
Yes, we can see it well, Sabina.
Okay, do you also see only me, or you see everybody here on the side? I don't know how it is in your view.
I see you and then the list of names. So maybe you can just...
All right. Because I'm thinking just it will cover the presentation. I will maybe minimize it. Or yeah. Okay, now I see you. I didn't think of this. Okay. All right, I'll just switch it up for a second. So I'm the fourth speaker in Kuma this year, and it's a very specific year. I have very positive experience from the last year. And I understand that the audience is mostly students and designers and architects, which is wonderful. So I will talk again about more or less what I presented also last year, but in an extended version, an updated version. So my title of my talk is the Architecture and the Siege: Experience Preserved and Remembered. And I do hope that it will be a nice bridge between the lectures we already heard until now and the lectures that you will be able to hear afterwards. But I am a little bit ambitious still with this talk and what I am hoping to achieve. And that is to inspire you to think critically about things concerning memory, commemoration, and architecture. So accordingly, I divided my talk in 3 chapters. And the first is it's a chronological division, but in each I want to make a point, specific point. So this will be the first is the siege of Sarajevo, and then we have the post-siege period, where I will look at a little bit, I will look at immediate post-war years, but also a little bit further than that, so some 16 years even afterwards. And then we have 3 decades, meaning we are approaching the 3rd decade since the beginning of the siege of Sarajevo. So let me start with the first. I will assume that more or less everybody knows the background of the story, but the Sarajevo was besieged for almost full 4 years between 1992 and officially ended the Dayton Agreement 1995. Although in the field, the siege actually ended when occupying forces left one part of the city called Grbavica, which was in a way concentration camp within concentration camp. The siege line was absolute, and it was installed there by the Serbian forces and the Yugoslav National Army. And here I want to immediately talk about, or mention at least, the individual memory and collective remembrance. There is, I will not go into discussing many terms and that occurred throughout last 2 decades in memory studies field, because it's a really vast terminology. But I will only say that for me, so the individual memory is normally seen as something that is susceptible to change. So our personal individual memory changes with influences from outside, depending on the context and historical events and so on. But what is more or less permanent reference is the experience we have related to a certain memory you're trying to remember. And in that sense, collective memory is a problematic notion as well, because it's obviously susceptible to political influence and manipulation, because it's a collection of selected remembrance. But that is, for this reason, I use a notion of collective remembrance, which is where I find the definition that a historian of the First World War, J. Winters, gives, and that is that collective remembrance is a public recollection, where it is the act of gathering bits and pieces of the past and joining them together in public. So the public is the group that produces, expresses, and consumes it. Having said that, in the Sarajevo, the experience of the siege varied widely, depending on the micro-location where you lived within the city. So even the location, even the building where you lived, your experience of the siege was very different perhaps than your neighbor's experience. And that is only normal. So this is just a point I want to make here. And then to make it a little less abstract, for me personally, what the siege meant is childhood under siege. And this is one of rare memories and documents that I have about the siege. And this is a photo I made of the kids on the block at the time. And I developed it only later when it was possible to develop photographs. I saw that I framed this photo with my malfunctioning camera in a very strange way. So there used to be zabranjeno parkiranje, and then I cut that off accidentally. So it looked like ranjeno, which means wounded. For me, that meant wounded childhood. And parkiranje was, I interpreted like pucanje. So the shooting is forbidden. So I'm really fond of this photograph. And I lived in this block, so it's a standard housing block, concrete block that sometimes I think it's indestructible. And I was lucky enough to live on the first floor of this block. Lucky for several reasons. One is that obviously the higher floors were much more exposed. Here I made a whiteboard sketch so you can get the idea of what I'm talking about. Of the section of this building. So the red line there is the line of the siege, the hills around. And living on the first floor meant that sometimes we would be so lucky to have water and electricity at the same moment for like an hour. And I think it happened like 4 or 5 times during the siege that we actually could put a washing machine on. But for the children who lived in these buildings and in this block where I lived in my neighborhood, this meant that we didn't, there is this myth of living in the basements inside of which also I sometimes say we moved to the basements, we live the whole siege in the basements, but that's not really true. Basements did make a lot of impression on me because we would go there only when there was heavy bombing. But our life was spent in the corridor or in the communication shaft here, so in the staircase, and simply outside around the buildings. It was impossible to contain us inside. And in this corridor, we would perform theater plays and play and whatnot. I don't know what children do. So then, in terms of living arrangement, here again a very quick sketch to give you an idea. So this is my apartment, and we lived there with 4 members of my family, and it was standard 4-member family apartment, maybe even a little bit more spacious. And this drastically changed into something where life shrunk to the kitchen area. So because that was the only place which you could keep warm. With illegal gas installation or some wood you'll find here and there to make fire, and especially during winter periods. And so a whole life was contained in there. So schooling was happening there, homeschooling, and cooking, bathing, eating, reading, everything. Toilets were even not used in winter because the installations was broke due to cold, due to freezing pipes and so on. I think we had even the coldest winter in '93. And already that, imagine people living on the 12th floor, that was a project in its own, to flush your toilet. And for the rest of the apartment was used as wood cutting workshop, storage and so on. But the common space was really important. And that was the staircase again. So it was quite, interesting, the beginning of the war. I was 10, I think. Yeah, I was 10 when it started. And the first realization that came to me when I realization that we are in something that is really incomprehensible to me, to my childish brain at the time. And it was when I was standing at it was August night, and I was standing at the window of my room. I remember clearly. It was very quiet because night before the city was burning. It was one of the heaviest bombings that happened since the beginning of the siege in April. So all of a sudden there is this black snow falling, and I was, of course, amazed with this, trying to catch this material falling from the sky, and then it would melt, disappear in your hands. And then I managed to catch few, and I realized that there's text on it. These are actually pages of books, and I couldn't place it. Where's the source? What is happening? And only later did we learn that the National Library was the source of this black snow. And this is a documentary I just saw the other day, where it begins with this black snow falling from the sky. And many people, you will find many accounts people who say that they witnessed this, and some who were closer to this fire that speak about blackbirds shooting out of the building and so on. And unbeknown to me at that time, this was also happening. And this is an amazing project of documenting destruction of built heritage by architects of Sarajevo, so members of the Association of Architects of Sarajevo. It was called differently at the time, but they conceptualized and realized a project called Warhitecture, where they documented 48 buildings and 2 urban complexes. They documented their destruction, and they mapped how and where and with which weapons, which artillery destroyed them. This is the part, the triangle here on the map. You can see this is Vijećnica and the rest of the old town, old city in Sarajevo. And it is really remarkable to think about this project now, because knowing how dire the circumstances were at the time, that this was even realized, because there was no paper, there was no material to draw, to map, to take photographs. But all this was still became a reality. And the project had few deliverables, and one of them was the exhibition, Warhitecture exhibition, which was realized and then clandestinely exported out of Sarajevo to travel around the world. And it was in New York. It was in here you see a German catalog and French catalog, and arguably it also caused some political changes and influenced the course of the siege, because political figures like Jacques Chirac and I don't know, they visited the exhibition at the time, and inside in the French catalog from Centre Georges Pompidou, the French architect François Chasselin, he argues for rebuilding, and he writes that world's architects are deeply moved and concerned with what is happening in Sarajevo and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that they are ready, once the siege is lifted, to come and work on redevelopment and rebuilding, on a meaningful process of rebuilding the city. And he also says there that one workshop already took place, and probably most of you know this, and that was a workshop organized by Libius Woods and Tom Meinen from Los Angeles, who visited Sarajevo in 1993, and they talked with Sarajevo's architects like Ivan Strauss at the time, and proposed certain solutions. But for me, I will not go into Libius Woods' proposals and his theory, which is quite known. But I would like to remind on his consultation, where he discusses the reality of his own theory. And there he gives a hypothesis saying that he expects that probably 90% of the city will be rebuilt. But he hopes that some 10% of the city will remain as a free space. And free space he defines as a place of creation for new thinking and social political forms, small and large. And he was also really concerned. He talked about Momo and Uzair, Sarajevo's known symbol of modernity, and because they were symbols of modern Sarajevo, they are also the buildings that were shelled already in the very beginning of the siege. And later in 2001, when New York's towers were attacked and destroyed, he makes this eerie connection with Sarajevo's towers as well. And he was not the only one. There, for example, Joe Sacco, the award-winning journalist who brings us his research and his narratives in a form of a comic books. He walks into Sarajevo in 1995. That is here, the left image. And that is already the moment when the siege was, when people were exhausted. Psychologically, there was practically no hope at all from this. Every year brought new challenges. And 1995, we were now already quite long into the siege. And he later reimagined, so this is what he sees. And then later in his narrative, he reimagines the Momo and Uzair burning and how they were destroyed. And it is really symbolically important, especially because of the theme of his narrative. And that is which if you didn't read it, I recommend everybody to read. He talks about Sarajevo warlords and the beginning of the war and the problematic ethnic divisions within the city as well. So I come back now again to that map we saw in the beginning. I made this diagram to maybe give another perspective on the siege because I want to explain a little bit in more detail the tunnel, which is another remarkable form of resilience during the siege. When impossible was actually made possible. So the only moment where the siege line actually broke was the area of the airport in blue here. And it was controlled by the UN forces at the time. And people who wanted to access the free zone down here, and then Mount Igman, which was under control of Bosnian army, they would run over this airport, and many lives were lost in these efforts. So I think 1 year into the siege, the Bosnian army realizes, okay, we need an underground passageway. And they make this project, they make a concept where Dobrinja, so that's the D side, the north side, would be connected with Butmir, the B side, underground, under the airport. And this is the project. This is what is left within an archive from this project, and it really shows how improvised this structure really was, and how, you know, here you can see on the left was the Butmir side. So here they used wood and wooden material because it was available on the free zone side, B side, and D side there was no material, so they used scraps and whatever was possible to find to build this. So on average, this was the structure. So you have some 100 meters wide and a bit more than a meter high, and it was really claustrophobic space. But you are talking here about some more than 800 meters, and I think the tunnel itself is about 700 meters, but with accessing trenches and safety areas altogether more than 800 meters. So again, this diagram just to give you an idea of what it meant. So basically, private houses were used as entrances and exits to the tunnel, and they started working on it in January 1993, and it was opened in July same year, so after some 5 to 6 months. And what is remarkable is that as improvised as it was, the two people were digging simultaneously all the time from two sides. It was it was impossible to even take proper measures. But these people digging from two sides, they literally met under the airport at one point. There was really not significant difference in height and at the point where they met. So once it was opened, I think the deepest point was about 5 meters under the airport runway somewhere, and it operated every day. I think the highest number was like 400 people passing through it daily. It was incredibly difficult way of crossing. There was underground water, very high underground water, so pumps had to be installed during winter. This water had to be pumped out, and electricity and the gas installations and whatnot found its place in this in this tunnel, but the bigger accidents in the tunnel itself were never recorded, which is impossible, but yeah, it's again possible. I think the biggest massacre happened in front when people were waiting, 9 people were waiting at the Bielonia house, that is this very on the right side, so B side, where people were waiting to enter the tunnel. And then the grenade fell and murdered them all. Yeah, so this is the tunnel. And then let me go further. We go then to the second part, where I want to look at some memorial acts and their effects. So what happened to the tunnel is after siege was lifted, the tunnel became immediately obsolete, and it started deteriorating. And there was no real interest in this structure. And one family on the B side, so Kolar family, they decided to preserve some 20 meters of the sequence of the passage, and they collected materials and whatever was dispersed all over the site. And then they opened a private museum. These are official. They were also official preservation works on the site. So this happened in '97 when all the remains of the tunnel were, the structure of the tunnel, was taken out, and the concrete blocks frames were put in the pathway, so to preserve the pathway of the tunnel. And this still exists under the airport runway. And then in the larger scale of the city, in the immediate post-war years, and already actually during the siege, more simple memorials were taking place to mark places where people were murdered by grenades and snipers. And here the big photo is where one of the biggest massacres happened on the market. And this place still exists as a place of life, the market. And of course the cemeteries, because the place for burials was scarce at one point, and all the people who needed to be buried, then the sport fields were appropriated for this purpose. They speak in themselves. Other important memorials that I would like to mention now, I mean, I could mention many more, but these are some that I find important, and for the time frame we have, are of course Sarajevo roses. They were conceived by a late professor of mine, Nejat Kurta, who initially they were imagined as memorials that would mark, so that these are actual traces of mortars, and they were filled with red resin, and only more than 3 people were murdered. And originally there were supposed to be names also installed next to these roses, but this never was realized like this. So the roses became somewhat ambiguous memorials, because they are really nobodies, but they also belong to everybody, and they have this documentary value. The other project is the archive by Fama. You can access this online, and they have incredible oral history archive and documentaries and archive images, footages. One very good documentary called The Terror, Mechanisms of Terror, Mechanisms of Survival, where they nicely talk about key aspects of life under siege. And there you can learn about resilience quite a lot. Other projects that happened a little bit later than immediate post-war years, this I believe was in 2006, is, for instance, the construction of a monument organized by the Center for Contemporary Art, where artists and art historians and others were invited to rethink the whole purpose and form of monuments and memorials. I think at that time, maybe 2 years before, Jānis Kunelis had his exhibition in Vijećnica, and Libius Foods also was invited, and he exhibited around the same time in Sarajevo as well. For me personally, this inspired me. These projects inspired me to think about what to do with the experience of the siege. And I was a student of architecture in 2006, graduating. So officially, you would receive the engineer diploma, and you had to produce detailed architectural project. So I decided to do a project on the tunnel. On the B side, the Utmir side, because the museum already existed there. So I wanted to know more about it, to learn more about the siege. And I went there, I talked with people, with the owners, and already realized that there is a dispute going on between Kolar family and how building across the private house by Bielonia family, and the other issues. And it was instantly clear to me that I don't have the time to even research into this properly. So I had to make decision, and my decision was to make this building conceptual, of course. And that was a memorial museum that only visually connected with the existing authentic part of the tunnel, these 20 meters. It was an alien black box that landed there on the site without much context. But inside the building was full of scenographic elements and tactile experiences. It was meant to communicate all the horror and also everything I learned about the siege next to my own experience after, only after the siege ended. And the project was received quite well. I got the highest marks, and I even had I made a simulation of passing through the building. So it was like a big theatrical play. But again, working on this project, I realized how little I actually knew about memorial architecture and what is the purpose of this and what is out there really. And that prompted me to go and research. And that meant a lot of historical research, a lot of archives, architectural history also, and then also the actual sites of memories and memorials, where I tried to talk as many managers of sites, designers. So this is just one sequence of Laporello I made for my doctoral thesis in 2015. And a version of this is now, a part of this actually is also published in my recently published book. So if I learned anything from this, is that a meaningful memorial project supports individual and collective social, psychological, and cultural processes. And this, of course, can mean very different things in different contexts. And then I come back to Sarajevo to see what it means there. And this is, so 2012, the 20th commemoration of, since the beginning of the siege, where the Sarajevo Red Line was installed for a day in the city. And the social relevance, as explained on the website of the author and director of the installation, says, this city needed to stop for a moment and pay tribute to its killed citizens, since it has never happened that all the 11,541 killed citizens of Sarajevo were commemorated together in such a manner. And while indeed this is true, I wonder what was the real effect, except to provoking very strong emotions, because emotionally it was incredibly loaded, and I think there was no person who didn't react to this installation. And it produced a remarkable visual effect, which is obvious from these photographs. But I think it's really a pity that it's really actually a two-dimensional effect, because I don't see here the meaningful purpose of this act, in a sense that it only represents number, and it does not invite the citizens for whom it is actually, I hope, so it was supposed to be installed in the streets. So citizens, in a way, were also some kind of empty audience who had to stand aside and revive and relive the trauma of the siege. So I can imagine that this project, while really important and visually, again, striking, it would be much more meaningful and valuable if, for instance, citizens were invited to contribute their own chair and place it there instead of these chairs being bought and purchased in Serbia, I think, or wherever, because that was one of the problems in discussions that occurred after on social media and elsewhere about this project. And the point I want to make here is that the discussion that happened after this installation led to nowhere. The tone in the end was very binary look on things, and that look is you are either with us or you're against us. So you don't like the chairs, you don't, where were you during the siege? What do you want? Or you like the chairs, then all these other people are idiots. So this is a very unconstructive approach to commemoration, and especially to dealing with trauma. So my question here is, what is the real motivation, and what are the effects on psychological well-being of the citizens? To propose some things that might help when thinking about these projects is are three things. There are many, but I decided to put these three in front. So the first is authentic sites. So places do have the sense of place. And if you build a memorial place on authentic site, that site has to be respected, and new architecture should not interfere or establish new hierarchies. So especially if it's a space of trauma. The second point would be that public participatory approach and public debate are essential. And this is recognized by many contemporary memorial projects and implemented as well. So this is not utopian idea. And three, speaking in architectural terms now, is open calls. So this means architectural competitions, expert jury, inclusion of relevant stakeholders, and the bereaved, if possible. So this brings me then to the third and final part of my talk, which is collective responsibility. I encountered this museum last summer in Sarajevo, and it invited me to see how we survived the war. And I immediately walked in because I really wanted to see how this family survived the war. And when I entered, I was shocked by banalization of collective experience, which was here illustrated in dubious infographics and symbols that are normally used to reduce the complexity of collective remembrance to images, to few symbols, and then also lock it for any other nuance and discussion. In this case, babies on potties. I mean, as part of this collective experience, I deeply regret that I did not see a personal narrative when I walked into this private yard, but I encountered this. On the other hand, it also can tell us that people obviously have, or we can be positive about it and say that people obviously have the need to get this across, to talk about this, to represent their experience, but perhaps they don't know how. So this is a hypothesis we can also think about. A different kind of example I want to bring here, because I think it's very relevant, is the War Childhood Museum in Sarajevo, which started as an open call to everybody who were children during the period of siege. And the question was, can you give us a sentence of what it meant for you, the childhood living, during the siege? And of course, I immediately participated and I sent in my photograph, and they have it now, and I'm happy about this. So they are really representing this the construction of collective remembrance. So they are collecting parts and artifacts of private stories, of private narratives, and then carefully giving us access to them. And not only this, I think the World Childhood Museum is important because they are doing their job ethically. They are it's a very risky and serious job. Of course, it's a business. Every memory site is in a way also a business, but it is incredibly important business. So what World Childhood Museum is doing is they have an ethical and a strategic plan where they want to learn from our experiences and their own, because the organizers are also children who were in Sarajevo during the war, and then bring this experience outside into the world to make it more significant and maybe important and helpful for other atrocities that are at this point also taking place all over the world. And what this means for the tunnel museum. So from the private museum, the private ownership ceased to exist in 2012 when the government took over, and the Memorial Fund Memoriala became the manager of the site. They are a government institution responsible for commemoration of the last war. Since the end of the siege, a lot of things happened at the site, and there were many additions, and the museum expanded, and it's still expanding. And the fact is that more and more tourists are interested and are coming and visiting the site. So the museum's infrastructure cannot handle this. So they, in 2016, there was an open call, which somebody sent me, and asking if I want to participate. And then I was skeptic about it, because I'm familiar with the competition culture in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and normally I don't really participate in. I did when I was studying and working in Sarajevo, but I don't really participate in the competitions. But I saw that the competition was organized by the Association of Architects, and that they helped in organization of the competition, and they were also independent jury members who had actually credibility to be in the jury. And I found it very important. So I made this tricky decision to actually participate. And it was also an invitation to rethink my former projects from 2006, and to see if my view on this design changed, if I would do it differently. And then I was certain that I don't want to make a building like I did in 2006, because I simply saw enough and know enough, at least, to know that that is not the way. I was thinking what could be then the solution, because there was this program of demands, and then you have to think, okay, am I going completely against the competition program demands and give them some strange solution I only think is worthwhile the trouble, or should I really answer this program of demands because this is what they need? So this is what I decided, to answer the program of demands, so to give all the spaces that they need in the interior of the buildings. But for me, the building had to be more than just a building and more than just a symbol and a statement. So I thought of that all the layers of that accumulated over time at the Tunnel Museum are relevant. That even the improvised whatever there is, you can see this messiness and this weird situation that is now created there, where you don't know maybe what is authentic or not authentic. It also, in a way, is fitting to how the whole project was made, and that is at least how what my logic was. And I thought, okay, I want to preserve this, but the precondition for the building, for any intervention, should be independent historical research to see what is the limit, what can we still discern as authentic and non-authentic, where certain things happen, did they happen where they are marked or not? And then the second important part was the materiality of the building, because for me, obviously, it was the earth. The earth had to be excavated from the tunnel. So it is really the essence of the structure. And I thought that by bringing it symbolically to the site and hopefully inviting people to work with it, for instance, as a workshop, rammed earth workshop, where you can test the quality of the soil and so on, or build a symbolic wall, you would have some kind of social engagement and perhaps bring younger generations and people who actually worked on the tunnel to reactivate this whole narrative. So this is a 3D impression that I made for the jury to get the idea of what I want, and I also planned some memory portals, so photographs that would show the evolution of the site. So these photographs would be like a gate, the entrance to the past, where you can see actually what changes happened on the site. The buildings, there are 2 buildings I forgot to say that were that were invited by the competition, one on the D, one on the B side. One would be the research center about the siege of Sarajevo, and the other one would be only dedicated to the tunnel. So the buildings are also, they are mirrored, so they look opposite sides, but the logic, the concept is quite the same, but then adjusted to the situation. Here I want to point to, which is maybe more interesting than my own proposal, and this is the competition in itself. So mostly it was Bosnian designers who participated, and when I looked at the proposals that arrived, there were a few categories. A few projects were trying to communicate the trauma through postmodernist language, like you would have these cracks and tears built in the buildings, and starry nights and shafts and absences. Then you have some would do it better than others. Then you had the typical Sarajevo School of Architecture, modern, big, white, beautiful blocks installed there, like aliens eating the whole site up. And then there were projects that literally imitated or used Liebus Wood's logic and making weird shapes coming out of buildings and sites and so on. And then and then there was this proposal, which I find really important. I think it was awarded honorary award. And it's called Živi spomeni. It's live monuments by Vernes Čaušević and Lucy Dinen. And they did not give architectural concept per se, architectural space, but they proposed to have this site as a site of historical workshop, as a timeline that would evolve, and people would work on it, and you would, learn while working with the site. And I find this wonderful idea. In a way, it also relates to my own. To my own approach, but they really decided to go against the competition rules, and they were brave enough to say, okay, this is what we think actually should happen on the site. So it's an important point of reference, and it's important to think about this. The positive side, what I saw as a positive development at the tunnel, and now with the management of the Fond Memoriala, was that they actually are now having a part of the exhibit that includes the people, the images and portraits of the people who worked on the tunnel. This is the unveiling of the installation of the images for the 24th anniversary. So this is a little movement forward, I think, and there are also some narratives by citizens who passed through the tunnel. One saying that I don't remember the tunnel or details, but I only remember the fear that I had. So a year after the tunnel, I expected some kind of public reaction, debate. Again, somebody saying you are with us or you are against us. What is this awful thing doing here? What is this? So I expected this, and I thought that would be good. It needs to go into public space. But it didn't. And then I thought, okay, I will do it myself. Let's try to organize discussion. And with the help of Association of Architects and Fond of Memoriala, we're also open for this. I invited speakers. Anna helped with the design of the poster, and she also talked. And we almost had a huge fight there with some people. But in the end, even though it was not again publicly really present, and not many people arrived in the end, I think it was a very successful event, a very successful discussion, because at the end of the event, the director of the fund, Memorial Fund, he told me, this was not bad. Let's do this more often. What do you think next time we invite people who are actually responsible for some crucial decisions around here and about sites of memory? And I embraced that, but it never happened until now. I hope it will happen still. So here, I want to say that I want to refer to Tony Judd, who talks about mismemories. He's a historian who talked about mismemories, and he says one of his key arguments was that the myths of one decade become the action and principles of the next. This is something you really have to think about, because by reducing remembrance to symbols, to whitewashing facts, to selected narratives that are fixed and that don't give space for nuance, for commentary, for critical thinking, we are creating myths. And I really believe that Judd was right, and that these actions, and you already see this in practice, are becoming principles of already in our generation now, and I'm sure of the next, unless we change this pattern. So here is this is something else, but for me it illustrates very well this concept of mismemories, because these are not untrue memories. These are memories that are true, but they are so black and white, and they are so selected that they actually misrepresent. So what does that mean? At least how I interpret it is, here is a Norwegian magazine who found the story interesting and me making this building, and the journalist is actually really professional and the story is very good, but the illustrations that came with the story are quite problematic, even though they're beautiful. They're more beautiful than mine drawings, I admit that. And but here I am as a 10-year-old girl who actually looks like, I don't know, 5-year-old, but who is in front of her future building of the tunnel Memorial Museum, while in the background you see the tunnel and my father exiting here in one part, and then the city is sitting on this tunnel, and then military is like in a paintball game going down and up, you know, the tunnel. So all these things happened, but put like this together, they are mismemory. And I'm approaching the conclusion, don't worry, but I want to say only that the built environment is important. There is a really nice little exhibition in the History Museum. If you already didn't see it, you should, by Jim Marshall, who showed us how within 15 years, so he took photos in 96, and I think, yeah, 2011, to compare what happened, what changed in the city. And the environment as we knew it during the siege is obviously rapidly changing. And I'm not sure what is left. Is those 10% that Libius Woods talked about, is that even there? Or is it 100% almost, you know? Let's say there is 10% of hope for something new, for a place of thinking. And Javad Karahasan also says, this is from the book he wrote during the siege, where he says, the ruins left of our city still protected us from the cold and the burning sun. They protected us just enough to let us endure this somehow, I smugly thought. And this is actually, for me, really relevant even today. Why? Because I come back now to War Architecture Project, and the Oslobođenje building literally translates as a liberation building, which was a symbol of the siege, of resilience during the siege. It was the building that was like few others that I showed, but it was attacked in the very first months of the siege, and then continuously attacked and destroyed throughout the siege. And during all this horror, people continued, journalists, employees of Oslobođenje continued to work and to use the spaces of the building, what was possible to use, to produce daily newspapers, were continuously published and were important medium of information, of informing for the citizens. And the building acquired this symbolic status of a monument for the siege. And it's incredible. It's actually unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it is not there any longer. what is there is this. Here are some remains that are still existing, and in the background, here in the foreground, you can see the new architecture that is on the place, on the site at the moment. And yes, so the idea is to reconstruct, to look back at war architecture, which is unjustly forgotten from public space, from our minds, let's say. It exists as some kind of reference, but there is no really thorough research about this. There is a small archive that we have, and we need to now analyze and digitalize, that shows that already correspondence during this period and the efforts that were incredibly poignant and human, and how much guts it took to make this project. And that today we have no trace almost of this. So the idea is to look back at this project and to map again now these 48 buildings and 2 urban complexes, to compare what happened in these 30 years, and to also collect personal narratives of people who participated, narratives of people who experienced these buildings, and other material that we can find. So see this as some kind of announcement of an open call I'm hoping that we can publish next year. And that it's important this process of creating or working on this project will be, again, so inclusive, what I just said of personal narratives, that it will be transparent and inviting for people to take part, to attack or to give whatever feedback, that it will be cross-disciplinary, so that we can invite not only architects and historians, but psychologists also need to be part of this, for example, and anthropologists. And in that way, to contextualize this symbolic heritage. So this is the point I want to make, and this is my very last slide, and this is a teaser that a friend of mine made in 2018, who invited me to come to Slobođenje to help him with scenography for a film he's making, because he's a movie director. And I accepted this, thinking, okay, this will be an opportunity for me again to see what changes, what is there still from Slobođenje. And then he attacked me with cameras, because he had this similar idea to mine. And I don't see this only as a serendipity moment, but I see this as hope that there is something more, that people can recognize the importance of this. So I will let you see this, and then I'm finished.
Kako sačuvati sjećanje? Materializovati ga i učiniti opipljivim je zapravo vječno civilizacijsko pitanje. Pećinski crteži su memorijal ostavljen nama u nasljeđe.
Meni je, znaš, kao djetetu, kad je počela opsada, koliko je meni bilo 10, ja mislim, da moj rođendan nekad u aprilu. Bilo mi je vrlo uzbudljivo, toga se sjećam. Ali sjećam se, ja sam gore kod bolnice i Koševo. I kad je stala opsada, pa sam s tatom prvi put prošla ovuda pored zgrade Oslobođenja, i toliko me dojmila ta ruševina, znaš. Eto, koliko mi je bilo 14. Tad je u stvari krenula ta moja fascinacija s memorijalnom arhitekturom. Kad sam vidjela tu ruševinu, to ti je bilo, ne znam kuda sam vidjela, nisam nikad ništa tako vidjela kao tu ruševinu. I pomislila sam da mora se čuvati to. Ta ruševina, eto ja s 14 godina, znači pojma nemam, realno ništa nikako, i mislila sam da će ona odstajati tu zauvijek. Međutim, naravno, s ekonomskog aspekta, svakog drugog ruševina je vrlo zahtjevno održavati. Ne znam ni kad su srušili, kad su stvari relativno za par godina, mislim, to se relativno brzo desilo. I to nikad neću prežaliti. I ako ćemo taj tvoj projekat raditi, trebalo krenuti, znači, s ovog mjesta.
Ono što jeste jedinstveno i moguće danas je sačuvati sjećanje u paralelnom svijetu. Svijetu proširene stvarnosti.
Znaš, to ima nešto što se zove sense of place. I recimo, kad sve nestane i kad se sve sruši i sagradi nešto novo, postoje i načini opet putem arhitekture ili eto augmentativne realnosti na neki drugi način, da se taj sense of place opet probudi, znaš. A ovdje kad uđeš u ovo mjesto, osjetiš. Ovo mjesto ima sense of place, ko konzerva za taj sense of place. I taj sense of place je najznačajnija stvar u memorialnoj arhitekturi, memorialnim prostorima generalno.
Yes, so thank you. I will stop sharing. Yeah. I hope somebody is there.
Thank you so much, Sabina. Yes, we're here.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, we've seen a version of your presentation last year, but seeing it again, it kind of brings up the same emotions, the same kind of questions, the same feelings that it did last year. So I have lots of questions, but I think it would be fair to open up the floor to our participants. So I would ask if anyone has a question for Sabina, maybe you can type it into the chat. You can even ask her directly. It wouldn't be a problem.
It's really nice to actually see faces.
Yes.
I you know, it's okay when you teach with students, that's different. But now it's, I must admit, it's very weird to speak to the screen. Yeah.
For those of you brave enough, maybe to.
I have a question for Sabina.
Yeah.
Perfect. Anna is here with us.
Hi, hello everyone.
Hi,
Sabina,
I'm going to make it a bit
it's
louder.
very nice to see your face again.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for yours. I really enjoyed it as well, the last Tuesday.
Yeah, I had a question for you. I mean, I always have many questions for you, but right now I think this would be interesting also for our student viewers. I have been writing something on a topic of secondhand memories for generations that have not directly experienced the war, but they know it from experiences of their parents and this collective memory. And I was wondering, since you were talking about this participatory approach and collective participation and memorialization, what would be the role of a generation that does not have individual memories of the war? What would be their role in this new processes of memorialization?
Yes, this is a question I ask myself all the time because it's such a big and important question, I'm not sure how to answer it. What I do know, at least what I do see, is that the more we insist on not sharing, or not, the more we are not listening, let's say, that there's more, this memory for them becomes antagonism. The less they want to know, the more they feel left out, the more they're not willing to engage. That is my feeling. And that's, I think, only normal as well. And in sense of participation, I think it comes back again to this collective remembrance, which means that if they are interested, if they want to learn, that they can take part simply in researching. I think, I'm not sure if I'm going the right direction now to answering the question, but I think the first step would be to actually invite younger generations to open up. At least I'm not thinking concretely about the Tunnel de Bay and the other memorial projects in Sarajevo, also like red chairs, because it's really a closed off, top-down approach to remembrance, to commemoration. And the younger generations simply, I don't feel, are invited enough. So for me, it would be interesting to research, to understand, because I even don't know what is their understanding of this period. I can only tell you from my own personal experience and emotion actually when it comes to Sarajevo. But when I see other projects in Europe, there are really constructive ways to approach this. There are, workshops, from art workshops to history workshops, debates, all kinds of events that can take place to engage people and to open the discussion, the debate, and in that way, then hopefully there are more follow-ups. Does it make any sense to you? What time is that?
I think you summed up the same confusion that I have in my own head. So it's nice to hear that somebody else also, because we can never know. We can base our assumptions on what you and I have from our personal experiences and these memories that were transmitted to us through our families and people we know. But I think for the whole generation that came after, it goes really through this collective memory that they are served via memorial architecture, prevailing narratives in the community, or even political options, and so on. So it would be very interesting to research what are their senses in it, and do they even have any interest in finding out more, or do they just want to take get distance from all of it, because it shapes their narrative now, 25 years after the war, something that they never experienced. It's still shaping their narratives. I think they might be sick of it, but as you said, we can never know until we do a proper research.
Yeah, this is exactly what it is, and I wonder if there is maybe some of the NGOs is dealing with this, but not to my knowledge, because some of the experiences I had, for instance, with this augmented reality museum idea to reconstruct the war architecture and the war heritage. Some people who are participating on the project, they have this immediately these wild ideas of reconstructing, for instance, the line of the siege with LED light, for instance. And that was at one point proposed to a younger person who was sitting with us at the table, and she was immediately like, please just stop with this already. Yeah, who needs that? I completely understand this reaction, but I also understand the other reaction. So this is something that, again, has to be discussed. We have to critically think about what this would mean. And I think the essential thing for me is to think about motivation. So, for instance, when you want to make a memorial place, what is your motivation? Is your motivation to make an egoistic, even though it's beautiful, art piece? So it's a unique and it's visually immediately clear, or is your motivation to really help citizens, for instance, or is your motivation to really preserve this memory for your children? And then already there, a lot can be solved, I think.
Just to further that question, Sabina, because on Tuesday, Anna was talking also about memorials with contested or almost like opposite points of view that were built in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
You have events that are commemorating different victims or from a completely different point of view. So in those places, for example, even if you open it up to let's say a participatory approach, the experiences of the same event are so different and in many ways conflicting, right? In that case, it's like, how do you find the common ground?
I think sometimes it's impossible. It's too soon still. Because look at the First World War. I mean, it took 100 years before the memorial was made where actually names of enemies are on one memorial. It took 100 years, and still this is one memorial. Look at the Second World War. I don't know of such memorial, and I don't think it will exist anytime soon. And we are, 30 years now since the war is normally a period when you have a memory boom, when really it comes to public space and there are a lot of actions and reactions, and this we can see in a lot of cases. It's nothing specific for Sarajevo. But these processes are incredibly complex and they take time. There are no formulas, there are no fast solutions. But the fact is we are where we are, and we have to deal with it, and then hope to be smart about it. Because I don't believe in attack. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's good, but sometimes I really think that people actually don't know. They don't. You have to if you have some knowledge, you have to educate them. You have to show them the possibilities, the options, and then they start thinking, okay, this actually can be different and can have more effect, and maybe indeed there is something to this meaningfulness idea, and So I'm not saying that you have to bring them, this term of reconciliation, which I'm not a fan of it at all, because it's used very generally and for contexts that are not comparable. But sorry, I'm going too far. But to say, I'm not saying it's possible always. It's just something to think about. And if it is possible, and I think in the context of Sarajevo, it can be possible, then we have to think about it.
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted, we do have a question from the audience, but perhaps before I get to that question,
okay.
I want to ask you first of all about your book. Congratulations. Your book, which was actually released last year in 2019, and it's entitled Designing Memory, the Architecture of Commemoration in Europe, 1914 to the Present. And it was released by the Cambridge University Press. So congratulations on that. So through that book, you're actually looking at memorials in the European context. But from what I understand, you've kind of excluded Bosnia from the book. And I know you have a specific reason to that for that. And I wanted to ask you, obviously, Europe has a long-standing tradition now in terms of how to deal with contested memories, with difficult memories. Like you said, there are actual studies and there's workshops, there's methods that have been developed. And I wanted to ask you, from your experience of writing this book and also doing lots of research on this, do you think that there are some things that could be implemented in Bosnia? Again, you being very much in touch with the local situation in terms of politics and also social structure and how things operate. Do you think there is a way of somehow transfer all this knowledge or certain things that you have come across to this local Bosnian context?
Yeah, thank you, Leila. I think after all these years and being busy with sites of memory, I feel like I really know even less than when I started, to be honest. Because again, all cases are quite specific, but probably there are some general guidelines or things that we can think about and then see if they can be tailor-made to a specific context. And yeah, concretely for example, for the tunnel project, when I decided to participate in the competition, so there was this program of demands, and I thought, okay, they really know what they need to operate, properly, to accommodate all the tourists coming and to have a nice space for work. But so and then I was shocked later when I talked with the curators at the Tunnel Museum, because I met them a few times already just to see what they are doing, because they are now extending I forgot to say that, but extending the tunnel passage. So I wanted to see how that is going, and and then I figured that they learned about my project only after it was selected for the realization and this competition, and they then saw the plans. So for me, this is incredible, because how can you make program of demands without talking with people on site? Already there is a huge problem. So they, when they saw my floor plan, they were saying, okay, but this information point cannot work like this. We have these groups of people and they are coming like that, and they are, so how do you, and I'm like, oh, wow, okay. We have to rework this, because this is, yeah. So let's start there, there has to be a bit more professional approach, and especially to sites of memory.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about this, I'm sure.
I can continue, but there are things.
So maybe, thank you for your answer. I just wanted to read the question we have from the audience. Hakim says, thank you, Sabina. for this lecture. It was really informative and interesting. My question is, do you think these memorial sites should evolve through the time with several artworks, or do you think it should be preserved as the way it remained? Perhaps Hakim means ruins. Hakim, do you mean like ruins that remain? Should they be preserved through time? Or I guess maybe the question is how to deal with the ruins. Like, do we?
Yeah. This is I mean, I don't know if maybe I was also misunderstood in terms of preserving ruins of Sarajevo. Of course, the rebuilding is important, and of course, this has to happen. It's, you know, that's without dispute. My point is that at least a layer, segments of what was there should be preserved, because otherwise we are erasing this history in physical space. So we have buildings like Vijećnica and other buildings. I think recently something was also renewed, rebuilt. There's no trace. They make, you know, the motto is the newer, the better than it was. So you literally are erasing history. While sometimes, of course, it's impossible, and maintaining ruins, it's incredibly complex task, but we don't have to preserve them all. Even for Slobođenje, there was a plan to preserve it, but I can imagine why this did not happen. However, you know, if a little part of Vijećnica was preserved, that would be more powerful evidence of this history than any new memorial, I think, that could be built there, or exhibition that now has to talk about this history. Yeah, so was that the question?
Yes, it was how to deal with the ruins, and so
so this is and something is left. It is normally because it's in a problem of property issues, ownership, but you know, very symbolic buildings like Oslobođenje, like Moment Uzed, and we know what happened with Moment Uzed, that Ivan Strauss lost in court because he was arguing for the authenticity of the buildings when they were restoring them, restoring the glass. He wanted particular glass. The project manager didn't want it because it was too expensive. So in the end, Strauss lost in court, which is also a symbolic battle, very important symbolic battle that is now forgotten. So now we have something that sort of looks like what it was before, but it really isn't. And then this whole period that happened in between is gone. You know, and look at Pancirka. I don't know if you guys know where Pancirka is. That is more complex because people live there, and of course they want their homes, you know, to be safe and restored and all that. But then they restored it completely, and they put a poster on the side saying this building was very important, and you know, a few images that will probably be gone. Maybe it's already gone. I don't know. I have a photo of it since February. This is not the way to do this. To preserve it's diminishing this history. That's at least how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. The Parliament building too,
yes, and many more examples,
unfortunately. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have another comment from Erkam. Thank you for the presentation and the speech. It was really good and useful too. I appreciate the way you conveyed the idea. Okay, thank you, Erkam.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Are there any comments from Facebook, Claudia? Maybe questions?
Nope, we don't have on Facebook.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Claudia. So if there are no more questions, I would like to take a moment to really thank Sabina for being with us today and for this amazing lecture. And we hope to see you soon live in Sarajevo, and we hope that, you know, we will be working together for many more years to come. And we also would like to take this time to thank all of you who have joined us in the Zoom chat, also who have joined us via Facebook. And thank you so much for, you know, keeping up with us, for being with us every time. And we do hope to see you next week. So next week we'll be talking about resilience as culture. So on Tuesday we'll have Azra Akshamia with us, and then on Thursday we're going to have Amra Haji Muhammad. It's going to be another exciting week, and we look forward to that. We hope that you can join us. I'm again live here from the Association of Architects in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Claudia is also here with us, the director of Kuma. So I would like to thank everyone once again, and see you next time. Sabina, thank you so much. So
thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Until
Thank you, Sabina. Yes, thank you, Sabina. Thank you, everyone. And also, I want to say hello to Selma. She was asking if we could open this up for further discussion. So Selma was one of our guests last year during the Art Week. And I was just thinking that I'm just so grateful to all of you and happy that we are running these conversations. And just to stress one more time that Kuma is really an open platform that actually belongs to everyone. So if there is the need for a space for discussion, we are always in first line and available, because I mean, that is really pressure, and I'm really happy that we're doing this. So thank you so much, Sabina,
I'm
Leila.
happy you guys exist. It's so important to keep the discussion running. So I wish you a great week next
time. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone that was with us tonight, and see you next Tuesday then.
All the best.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Everyone.
Amil, thank you all for your comments and on the site. So see you next time. Bye everyone.